When I first met someone who was part of the independent fundamentalist Baptist church, I was very surprised. You see, my whole life, I had always assumed, like probably many of you have, that all the IFB people or people who are part of the independent fundamentalist Baptist church, or not the IFB church, but you know, like an independent fundamentalist Baptist church, were just like these people who were seeped and just a part of this very legalistic ideology that took what Christ said and said, hey, you know what, we're gonna make our own religion out of that, be very works-based, so we're gonna do this and we're gonna do that, even though scripture doesn't necessarily command it, and we're going to impose that upon other people. Because that's what legalism is. It is imposing your convictions that aren't specifically stated in the Bible onto other people. I mean, I was like you all. I thought that all the IFB people, everyone who went to an IFB church had, you know, as many children as they possibly could and wore skirts every single day and to anywhere, like just would wear skirts everywhere that were knee length, or almost like the Mennonites, you know, that's what I thought they were, is just have as many children as you can, you know, they wore skirts, they were all homeschooled. Let me tell you, I was very surprised when I actually met a person who went to an IFB church and was almost completely normal. And when I say almost, I mean, to you guys, you probably would say, oh, well, they're a little off here, a little off there, whatever, was probably more normal than me. You see, I grew up homeschooled. We had standards, obviously, for our family, but that wasn't like, oh, this, like, God will bless you if you have this standard, or God will curse you if you have this standard, or blah, 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 blah. It wasn't a form of legalism. It was just like, these are the standards for our family, and these are our convictions, and obviously, like, when you're a full adult, God will convict you in the ways that you feel, and you know, you can seek out those convictions for yourself, but never that form of legalism where it was like, you have to do this and everyone in this church has to do this. Imagine my surprise when, like I said, the person that I met at college was nothing like this. The first person I met who had come from an IFB church was actually my roommate in college. And something that I found out very quickly, very quickly, well, I didn't even know she was from an IFB church, just an independent Baptist church. And what independent really means is that they're not part of an organization. They aren't required to give money. Like, this organization does not tell them what to preach, does not tell them what to believe, and that's what independent means. Okay, so for that, I don't know if that will help contextualize that a little bit for you, but I did not know that she went to an IFB church. And she was a fairly normal person that you would see, probably a normal Christian, right? Like, she went to church, but she also was public schooled. You know, she wore shorts and pants and, you know, normal clothes, like not wearing skirts all the time. Now, obviously, she still wore dresses and skirts and like pretty things to church, but it wasn't this like legalistic thing. That was her conviction. And her family only had 2 kids, which absolutely blew my mind when I learned that she went to an IFB church, like she was part of that, because I genuinely had thought those are the people that just enforce this legalism on you, that are like very, like, you know, when you think of fundamentalism, you think of legalism, and you think of like these things that are enforcing, I don't know, these like standards on you that aren't necessarily specifically stated in the Bible. But come to find out, like, she was from a completely normal family. She was public schooled, had a desire to serve and love the Lord, of course, but she had a very strong relationship with him, but she wasn't sitting there in deep-seated conviction over some of these items that a lot of my previous thoughts and perceptions had been. So I ended up going to an IFB church with her because both of us had grown up, you know, going to all of the services, Sunday morning, Sunday evening, Wednesday night, and being very involved in church and very involved in serving. And so I ended up going to church with her. And I noticed when I went to an IFB church that there were people in there that had deep-seated conviction. That is true. The majority, especially of that church, I would say almost all the people there did not at all in any way push their convictions on other other people or say like, oh, like you're sinning if you're listening to this type of music, or you're sinning if you're not wearing skirts, or you're sinning if you're not, you know, having as many children as biologically possible. That was not the case at all. They actually spoke the real true gospel of Jesus Christ and like conviction in the service, talking about by conviction in the service I just mean being convicted over true genuine sin. If you haven't subscribed yet, be sure to go ahead and subscribe if you're liking this content. I talk about everything faith, finances, and wifehood, and I'm Eliana Keller, and talking about salvation and like all the things that you would normally hear about in any normal service. That was the focus. Like it wasn't like, oh, rock music is evil. Now I will say I've gone to several IFB churches since this point, and there are some pastors that will preach against rock music. Maybe not preach against it, but they will say like, are you being careful with what is getting put in your mind? For instance, rock music or blah 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 blah, you know, and they'll give like a couple examples. But I would say the majority of people who pastor IFB churches or go to IFB churches do not believe that rock music is inherently sinful, do not believe that not wearing a skirt is inherently sinful, all of these things. It's like a very small minority. Like just as in any case you'll have an extremist, like in progressive churches you'll have extreme progressives, and then you'll have like normal people in other types of churches. So I do think within the independent fundamentalist church you'll have those people who are very legalistic. I won't call them fundamental, because fundamental just means following God's word as it is written. But you will have people who are taking God's word and creating this legalistic gospel out of it. That is not the majority. I would say that those are the extremes, and I've experienced it very little. About 3 or 4 years now, and I've very rarely noticed it, and if I have, it's definitely more on the extreme side and very few people. Now they will preach against certain things, as in, I'm trying to think. They will like preach like, okay, is it like we need to be careful with what's going in our brains, but they won't explicitly say, oh, this type of music is bad and this type of music is good, or this type of dress is bad and this type of dress is good. Like that is not the goal. The goal is just the continually renewing our minds in righteousness, and that's kind of the purpose of that message, not the whole you must do this or else you're sinning, or you know, whatever people think of when they think of fundamentalism. It's not that. So I know some of you are gonna say, I'm just gonna cut some stuff while I'm talking, but some of you are gonna say you are not painting this IFB church in the right light, you're not being negative enough towards them, so I'm gonna click out of this video and leave. Listen guys, just hear me out. I thought the exact same thing. Like I was in the exact same place. I thought that it was toxic. I thought that, you know, it wasn't doctrinally sound, that there was legalism going on, etc., etc., etc. Trust me, I thought the same things that you guys did. I did, truly. And then I actually went to one, and then I went to several. I think the thing is we listen so much to the voices that are loudest. And right now the voices that are loudest are of people who truly were seeped in legalism, and that was the toxicity of it, right? Having convictions, having morals, that's not toxicity. But taking those morals that aren't explicitly stated in the Bible and creating a whole separate religion based on them, that is the toxic part that we are seeing. That's the part where with the Duggar family and shiny happy people, or the fundamentalists that you might hear online, they genuinely grew up in this legalistic religion that wasn't the true gospel. I would truly appreciate it. And also, if you want this video to get out to more people, to spread this message, go ahead and give it a like. If this content was informational for you and you've learned something from it, I would really appreciate it. And I think other people learning about this would definitely appreciate learning about it too. So thanks. The fact of the matter is, while some churches might have been, and perhaps there's still some churches who still are legalistic that are independent fundamentalists, I would say from my personal experience, that the majority of them most likely are no longer, if they were before, I don't know if they were before or not because I wasn't there, but are no longer steeped in that legalistic ideology that you've heard of. I think there's a lot more toxic, quote-unquote, fundamentalists than the IFB church. And like I said, I hate to call it the IFB church because it's not the church, they're independent churches. And that leads me to my next point, where there were people within these churches that truly were hurt. They might have been hurt big, whether it was by leadership, taking abusive situations. That doesn't mean you leave just a whole denomination because of abusive situations in some circumstances. At this point, I think a lot of them have guards up for pastors, they have guards put up for people working in the children's ministry and stuff like that. And I'm not saying that every church, IFB church, does. Like I said, they're independent, they function differently sometimes. But a lot of the churches that I've been to in the past couple years do have guards up, and there's not just like one person working with the children or anything weird like that, just as in normal churches would do. I have heard some stories of people who have gone to an independent fundamental Baptist church, and there was grief there, and maybe some people in leadership took advantage, or people in leadership hurt children or hurt like committed adultery or like committed these very deep sins that hurt God and hurt other people. And unfortunately, as is with any case, if there's not accountability, that is a deep tragedy, and it's really like not at all what God stands for. It's not at all what Christianity stands for. And unfortunately, it does put a bad rap on Christianity and really any type of denomination, like whether you're Catholic or Presbyterian or Lutheran. When something bad like that does happen, it does kind of put a negative connotation on that whole denomination. And so I think that that's one thing that has happened with independent fundamental Baptist churches, is because of the hurt and the pain that some people have truly gone through, and because of bad leadership and there wasn't accountability within that church, it really caused people to be like, okay, I'm not gonna have anything to do with that denomination, which makes sense. Like I can't even imagine going through like the pain of having your children hurt, or having, someone commit adultery, or just like the pain of just having people in charge or in leadership prove to be hypocrites, I'm sure is very traumatic. And so it's definitely understandable that people would not go to that denomination after that happened, or specifically churches like that one. I think because it is an independent church, like any type of independent church, it's really hard to give a general rule because different churches are different. And so some churches do have this leadership complex where, the people in charge aren't being held accountable, and like they don't have enough deacons that are kind of like in their life holding them accountable. The pastor's kind of the head honcho, and they can do whatever they want. Other times, there is good accountability within churches, any type of independent church. And so that's definitely something that I think if I went to any church, whether it's independent fundamental Baptist church, whether it's independent Baptist, whether it's Southern Baptist, whether it's Presbyterian, whatever church I would go to, I would definitely be on the lookout for accountability, for that church structure that was placed in the early church with the deacons, with the pastors. Having accountability there is very important, and having accountability set up. I know some pastors who they won't meet with women one-on-one with a woman, and so they set up these boundaries for themselves so that way they can't be accused, and so that way they won't actually fall into that sin. And so I think with any church that you go to, you do have to be on the lookout for, is this going to be a safe place for my kids? Is this a safe place for us? Is this doctrinally sound? Is there accountability in place with any type of church that you go to? And especially this could be the case with independent churches, because obviously, like I said earlier, independent just means they're gonna be different. Like there's gonna be different maybe standards or convictions, and you just really have to be discerned. And with any church that you're going to pick, you need that discernment. So even if, say, you're part of the Presbyterian denomination, even if you're going to different Presbyterian churches within that denomination, you still have to be discerning of the people that are there and being very aware of the people that are there and making sure that there's there's accountability and all of that put into place. My heart definitely goes out to people who have been hurt by people in independent fundamental Baptist churches. I definitely don't think you just forsake a whole denomination because of the hurt of one church or a couple of church families. However, I understand that people do that, and it makes sense to me that, especially like if your children got hurt or they could have gotten hurt, that you would move on from that and maybe choose a different path. That's definitely understandable. You don't have to make that choice, but I understand if you do, because it doesn't make sense. Like, if yes, there is church hurt, and at the end of the day, church hurt is not going to be an excuse for not going to church and choosing not to prioritize your relationship with God. We do need to understand that all human beings are fallen sinners, and that does not in any way justify anyone's sins who you've come into contact with. But there is a place for, we're gonna leave this person, this church, maybe even this denomination if you're that concerned about it, and move on from there. My husband and I are very discerning whenever we go to new churches, and if they don't feel like a right fit for us, definitely don't continue to go to them. But in the same way, in most churches, there's not, you don't necessarily know everything about it from right away. So if you start seeing those patterns, it may be time to be like, okay, well, let's move on from this specific church. And obviously, this is with any church. I would advise this for any church that you're going to. Like, if you're non-denominational, like, take these same principles and apply it there, because church hurt happens in non-denominational churches. It happens in Wesleyan churches. It happens in Presbyterian. It happens in all different types of churches. And so definitely take that into consideration for any church that you're going to.